Bonjour, welcome. Today we will hear from Dr. Supriya Sharma, Chief Medical Advisor for Health Canada, as well as Dr. Marc Berthiaume, Director of the Bureau of Medical Science of Health Canada. Aujourd'hui, nous entendrons des allocutions de Dr. Supriya Sharma et de Dr. Marc Berthiaume de Santé Canada. Nous prendrons ensuite vos questions jusqu'à midi 45.
We'll be taking your questions
we will
until
take your
12:45.
questions on vaccine approval until 12:45. At 1 p.m., we will be back with, on stage, Dr. Howard New, Major General Danny Fortin, as well as Dr. Sharma and Berthiaume. And they will be accompanied by spokespeople or experts from different federal departments. À 1 heure, nous serons de retour sur le podium avec les Dr. Howard New, Major Général Danny Fortin, Dr. Supriya Sharma et Marc Berthiaume, as well as aussi des experts de différentes agences et ministères fédéraux. Donc, over to you, Dr. Sharma.
Thank you, Eric, and good afternoon, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I'm here to talk to you about Health Canada's authorization of the first COVID-19 vaccine in Canada, manufactured by Pfizer and BioNTech. This is a critical milestone in our fight against COVID-19 and in our efforts to provide every Canadian with access to a vaccine. Canadians can have confidence in our rigorous review process and that the vaccine was authorized only after a thorough assessment of the evidence demonstrated that it met Health Canada's strict standards for safety, efficacy, and quality. I'd like to describe what this Health Canada authorization means and, importantly, what information we've made publicly available to summarize the science and evidence that formed the basis of this decision. Health Canada approved this vaccine through an interim order pathway that allowed us to accelerate the overall review process while still applying our rigorous standards for safety, efficacy, and quality and making our decision based only on science and evidence. We accepted and assessed information from Pfizer-BioNTech as it became available during the product development process. This rolling review shortens the time it takes to authorize a new vaccine. The review involved a dedicated team of our most experienced reviewers with expertise in a wide variety of scientific domains, including clinical medicine, biochemistry, immunology, and other disciplines relevant to the development, testing, manufacturing, and quality control of vaccines. We concluded that there was strong evidence supporting that the benefits of the vaccine outweighed the risks, and the manufacturer can scale up production while providing consistent assurance of quality. Once the vaccine is in use, Health Canada and the Public Health Agency of Canada will closely monitor for any adverse events, both in Canada and abroad, and will take action if any safety concerns arise. As part of its authorization, Pfizer-BioNTech is required to continuously monitor the use of the vaccine and report any side effects or new safety concerns to Health Canada. We know that even the best vaccines will only be effective if people trust them and ultimately agree to receive them. An important part of the building trust is openness and transparency, ensuring that people have as much information as possible to help them make informed decisions for themselves and for those they care for. In our continuing efforts to be as open and transparent as possible, we are publishing the technical information for each COVID vaccine and treatment, as well as all other information on vaccines to the government's main COVID-19 website. Our staff has been working around the clock to make this content available and easily accessible. The content includes the Canadian Product Monograph, which is a scientific document that describes the content of the vaccine information for patients, how it should be used, how safe and effective it was in clinical trials, and any warnings and precautions for its safe use, as well as the regulatory decision summary, which provides information on the submission and an explanation of Health Canada's decision. We put all of that information in one site, not only for this vaccine, but we'll be adding to that with other vaccine authorizations, and it can be found at covid-vaccine.canada.ca. So that's covid-vaccine.canada.ca. We are also publishing additional information on vaccines, our authorization process, the different types of vaccines we are reviewing, and basic details about the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. In the coming weeks, we will publish a more comprehensive scientific summary of the data supporting the authorization and then the detailed clinical trial data we assessed when making our decision. Now that a vaccine is authorized, of course, people want to know when they will receive it. The federal government is working closely with provinces, territories, and public health partners to align plans for the timely rollout and will share information with Canadians as new developments unfold. It's important to note that initial supply of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine will be limited, with more vaccine becoming available in spring 2021. Health Canada is also reviewing another 3 vaccines, and the government has signed 7 advance purchase agreements to secure supply. Today's authorization marks a critical milestone in our efforts to bring COVID-19 under control, and the availability of vaccines will increase throughout the year, providing every Canadian with the opportunity to be immunized. Thank you.
Bonjour.
Good day. Thank you for being with us today. I'm here to announce that Health Canada has authorized the first vaccine against COVID-19 in Canada, created by Pfizer and BioNTech. This is a significant step in our fight against COVID-19 and in the efforts we are making for all Canadians to have access to a vaccine. Canadians can have confidence in our rigorous assessment process and be assured that the vaccine was only authorized following an in-depth evaluation of the data, and that it ensures safety, efficacy, quality to our standards at Health Canada. I'd like to explain what this authorization means and also what information we published to summarize the scientific data we based our decision on. The vaccine was authorized under an interim order, which allowed us to accelerate the process while maintaining rigorous efficacy, quality, and safety norms, standards. We are based strictly on science in making this decision. Science Canada assessed the information provided by Pfizer and BioNTech in the process of their work. This continuous process meant that there was less time required in order to go through all the steps in the process. The technical experts in a variety of scientific fields, such as science, bioimmunology, and other disciplines involved in the testing and quality control of vaccines were involved. We found that there is solid evidence to show that the benefits outweigh the risk and that the manufacturer can increase production while maintaining the quality of the product. Once the vaccine is administered, Health Canada and the Public Health Agency of Canada will ensure close monitoring of any adverse effects in Canada and abroad. If there are any concerns about safety, measures will be taken. Based on authorization conditions, Pfizer-BioNTech have to constantly oversee the use of the vaccine and always note any potential side effect to Health Canada. We know that the best vaccines are only effective if people trust them and are prepared to be vaccinated. To maintain confidence, it is important to be both open and transparent. Communicate as much information as possible so people can make informed decisions for themselves and for their loved ones. In a constant concern for openness and transparency, on our COVID-19 website, we have specific information on every vaccine and every treatment for COVID-19 and other information about vaccines. Our staff is working tirelessly to make this information easily accessible. You will find the Canadian monograph of the product, a scientific document that explains the composition of the vaccine, information for patients, the use, the safety, its efficacy during clinical trials. You will also find a summary of regulatory decisions that provides information on the presentation and an explanation of the decision made by Health Canada. There is additional information on vaccines, authorization processes, and the types of vaccines we're looking into, as well as basic information on the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. All of this information can be found at the website covid-vaccine.canada.ca. Over the coming weeks, you will see full, in-depth summaries of all of the information that led to the development of this vaccine and all of the factors that led to the approval by Health Canada. Now people are wondering when they will be able to access this vaccine. The federal government is working closely with provinces and territories as well as partners in the public health area to harmonize distribution promptly and will keep Canadians informed of the evolution of the situation. It is important to note that the initial quantities of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine will be limited. Further doses will be available in the spring 2021. Health Canada is currently examining 3 other vaccines. The government has 7 purchase agreements, anticipated purchase agreements to ensure supply. This announcement today is a crucial step in our attempt to curtail COVID-19. This will give every Canadian an opportunity to get vaccinated. Thank you.
Merci, Doctor. We will now open the line to questions from the media. Please, just a reminder that today we'll take questions on the Pfizer vaccine approval until 12:45. So please keep your questions on the vaccine rollout for the portion at 1 p.m. Nous prendrons vos questions jusqu'à 12:45 sur l'approbation ou l'autorisation du vaccin de Pfizer.
We'll be taking your question until 12:45 and on this Pfizer vaccine. So we'd ask that you to focus on the distribution issues after 1 p.m.
For those asking questions in the room, please make your way to the freestanding mic. Operator, over to you.
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. There will be a brief pause while the participants register for questions. Thank you for your patience. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. Il y aura un court délai vous permettant de vous enregistrer dans la file d'attente pour la période de questions. Merci de patienter. Our first question, la première question, Lina Dib, La Presse canadienne. Your line is open. Please go ahead.
Oui, merci. Bonjour, Monsieur Berthiaume.
Question. Yes, hello, Mr. Berthiaume. You are saying that Pfizer has to monitor what happens with its product and advise Health Canada of any problem. I'd like to know whether Health Canada, independently from Pfizer, is also monitoring. For instance, there were 2 people in the UK who had an allergic reaction. Are you independently looking at what's happening with the vaccine, or are you waiting for the information from the company? Answer. Thank you for your question. Health Canada examines, alongside with public health, other types of effects of the vaccines. There are a number of mechanisms to take into account. When there are side effects in Canada or abroad, the company has to advise Health Canada within a certain timeline. Aside from that, in Canada, there is a system whereby healthcare professionals, when they note undesirable side effects upon use of the vaccine, must report this to the provincial, territorial agencies responsible for public health, and this information is also shared with Health Canada. So there are a number of systems in place to make sure the vaccines are safe once they are marketed and available. As to what you're referring to, the allergic reactions that were reported in the UK, Health Canada is also cooperating closely with other regulatory agencies. We already have approached the UK regulatory agency to gain additional information as to those cases that were reported there. So there are multiple systems in place to closely monitor the safety of the vaccine. The approval was done very rigorously, but we are also very closely following the evolution of the drug on the market in cooperation with multiple partners. Thank you for your question. Follow-up? Question. Yes. Can you tell us where you are as to Moderna, which I would imagine will be the next vaccine on the list? There are 3, I think you mentioned. Is Moderna the next one? Answer. Thank you for your question. There are 3 other vaccine candidates that are currently being reviewed. We can say that Moderna is the most advanced among the other 3 candidates based on the information we received and what we are currently overseeing currently. We don't have a specific date to identify for the approval of the Moderna vaccine, but we're working closely to review the data we actually currently have, and we expect an approval shortly, but we can't identify a date at this point as to the Moderna vaccine. Thank you, Doctor. Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, Mia Rabson, The Canadian Press. Votre ligne est ouverte. Please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm curious if you could explain this authorization. I know in the United States and I think in Europe, they refer to it as sort of an emergency use authorization. But the Prime Minister said earlier this week that it's not an emergency authorization in Canada. So I'm wondering if you can just explain the difference and if it's not an emergency use, if there are caveats on this approval that are different than in other types of approvals that Health Canada would give.
Right. Thank you very much. I think when people think about the term emergency use authorization, they often equate that with something that's less than a full review. And so the distinguishing piece in terms of the Health Canada review is that it is a full review in the sense that we looked at the same type of data that we would normally when we look at any vaccine for authorization. It was authorized under what we call the interim order pathway, which gives us some flexibilities about the way that we do the review, including the ability to do what we call, as we said, the rolling review. So to accept information as it becomes available, compared to waiting till all of that information is available before starting the review. In addition, it gives us some flexibility around putting terms and conditions on licenses and other information as well that's required. So the distinction is that it is through an interim order pathway. Those interim order pathways are similar to emergency use authorization in that they were put in place in response to the public health emergency, but we want to make sure that we reassure Canadians that that review is basically the same review as we would with any vaccine. It has looked at all of the information. And then just in terms of other authorizations, I think some people have been asking about the comparison of the Canadian authorization with potentially like the UK authorization. So in the UK, they authorized one specific lot for a temporary authorization, whereas ours is broader. So it allows for the authorization of multiple lots, multiple manufacturing sites, and it does look at the overall vaccine. It also included, as part of that authorization, the information on instructions for use, full information in the product monograph in terms of labeling, and additional information as well. So it really was akin to a full authorization.
Thank you, Doctor. Follow-up?
Yeah, I'm also interested in this. You're talking about you have to get data from the company if there's adverse reactions. If you're sort of monitoring it yourself, you're getting information about what happened in the UK with those allergic reactions. How do you convince Canadians when they hear stuff like that, well, you're still checking to see if it's safe, so why should I get it? What do you say to Canadians who would be afraid to take this vaccine when they hear that we're still monitoring it to see if it's safe?
Thanks. So to Canadians, what I would say is first and foremost, the authorization follows a really rigorous review of all the scientific and technical data from the clinical trials and all the manufacturing and all the preclinical data, all the research that has gone into the vaccine so far. When we do an authorization, it means that we've looked at it and the benefits outweigh the potential risks. But it is still a drug, it's still a vaccine, and there are potential risks even if they're rare. So that's why it's important that we continue to monitor it. So I would say to Canadians, we've authorized it. If it is their turn to get the vaccine, they absolutely should feel comfortable getting that. But we still do need to continue to monitor it as we would any product, because obviously when we do the research are done in clinical trials. They're done in smaller groups of people under ideal conditions, and we need to get information from the vaccine as it goes out and starts to get used in higher numbers of people, not only in Canada, but around the world.
Certainement. Donc, la question était, comme on continue
Answer.
dans le fond
So the
à
question
surveiller les effets
was,
secondaires du vaccin,
given the fact that we're
comment
still
peut-on,
overseeing
comment
potential
peut-on
side
expliquer aux
effects of the
Canadiens, là,
vaccine,
dans
how to
le fond,
explain to Canadians
les convaincre ou les
or convince them or encourage them
le vaccin.
to be vaccinated.
Disons que les effets secondaires du vaccin,
These side effects of the vaccine
parce que c'est comme un
can
vaccin, c'est
occur.
comme
I
un
mean, a
médicament.
vaccine
Il y a
is a
toujours,
drug. There's
dans le fond,
always
une question de risque-bénéfice lorsqu'on prend
this
on administre un
calculus
produit
of
de santé. Le vaccin,
risk-benefit
pour la COVID de Pfizer
analysis.
qu'on annonce
The
aujourd'hui,
Pfizer
est
vaccine
examiné de façon
was
rigoureuse.
examined
Ça veut pas dire qu'il y a
rigorously, which
aucun
does
effet
not mean there
secondaire.
are no side
On
effects.
travaille donc activement
We
à
are
surveiller ces
actively
effets
working
secondaires-là. Mais ce qu'on peut
on
dire, c'est qu'on a
monitoring these
d'excellentes
side
données
effects.
sur
What we
un
can
grand
say
nombre
is
de
we have
personnes
excellent data
qui nous
on a
permettent de
large number of people,
caractériser là, très
which
bien son profil de
characterizes
risque et de
the risk
bénéfice.
profile
Puis,
and the
de façon
risk-benefit
rigoureuse,
profile
l'examen a été
rigorously.
conduit
The assessment was done rigorously. We can reassure Canadians that getting the vaccine is a benefit to them. Also, another thing to remember is that when we get vaccinated, it's positive for ourselves, but it's also good for our loved ones in our community. So it goes beyond individual protection. As Dr. Sharma said, it's an assessment that was done, even though it was done more quickly than usual, it was done as rigorously as it would have been done for any other vaccine approved by Health Canada in the past. Thank you, Doctor.
For 2 questions, we'll start with Toronto Star.
Hi, Tonda McCharles, Toronto Star. Dr. Sharma, could you speak about, though you concluded that the benefits outweigh the risks, can you talk about some of the side effects that people might expect, some of the things that you would consider within a normal range, and some of the things that actually maybe you want to watch more carefully? This report out of Britain about them looking at allergic reactions, for example, can you talk a little bit more about what's acceptable side effects, what would give you some concern?
Thanks for the question. Maybe I'll start with the UK reports because I know there's a lot of interest in them. So I think it's really important to say that, as we monitor the vaccines, adverse event reports will come up. So what do we know? We have to look at what we know right now, what we know from the assessment that we've done, and then what we do going forward. So with respect to the UK cases, we do know about them. We've been working really closely with our UK counterparts to get additional information about them. We know that those were allergic reactions that happened quite close to after somebody got the vaccine, and that the individuals were treated appropriately and have recovered. In terms of the clinical trials with respect to allergic reactions, out of the close to 44,000 people in the clinical trials, there were 2 cases of allergic reactions that were more on the severe side. One was in the group that got the vaccine. One was in the group that did not get the vaccine. So it wasn't a significant finding in the trials. However, we know that with all vaccines, there's a risk of allergic reactions. And that's why when people receive vaccines, we ask that they remain in the area that they get the vaccine for a period of time, usually 15 to 20 minutes, to be monitored. And that's because we are introducing something foreign to the body, and it is possible to get an allergic reaction, however rare. So in terms of when something does come up with respect to vaccines, we take a look at it. We assess to see whether or not it is even related to the vaccine, and we're still in that phase now. And then we see if there's anything else that we need to change about how the vaccine should be administered, how it should be used, the information that we would put out. So we're still in the phase of looking at the 2 cases, working with our international counterparts, and if there's any change in the way that the vaccine should be used, we will make that publicly available, share that with everyone before the first person gets vaccinated in Canada. So that's with respect to the allergic reactions. With respect to reactions in general, the ones that were found for the Pfizer vaccine have been in line with what we see in other vaccines. So the most common reaction that was seen was a little bit of discomfort at the injection site itself. The most common was a bit of fatigue. And then the next after that was a bit of headache. In most of those cases, they were around the same types of symptoms from the first vaccine to the second vaccine, with the exception of fatigue. People felt a bit more fatigued with the second. So all of the reactions that we had seen were relatively mild, they were short-lived, and then they resolved. We are always on the lookout for more serious adverse events as well. In total, when we look at the overall population in the clinical trials, the rate of serious adverse events was quite low. So it was 2.8% of the population for people over the age of 55, and 4.6% of all serious adverse events for people under the age of 55. So relatively low. We are always looking for any additional side effects, and that's why we continue to monitor. As Dr. Berthiaume has talked about in his response in French, we have both requirements on the company to continue to monitor, and they have requirements to continue to monitor the patients in the clinical trials for 2 years. And then we also have a system for monitoring in Canada with public health officials and Health Canada to monitor all of the doses and the outcomes as well. So there's a very strict system in place, and in fact, these cases being identified is a sign that the system is actually working. They were identified, they're being investigated, they've been shared with everyone, and we're looking into whether or not there are any impacts for Canada.
Donc, les effets secondaires qu'on observe avec le
So
vaccin
the side
Pfizer,
effects that have been
suite à
noted
des
with the Pfizer
essais,
vaccine
sur des
following
essais cliniques sur 44
clinical
000
testing
personnes,
on
dont presque 22 000 personnes vaccinées,
44,000 individuals,
sont des effets
so close to
secondaires qu'on quantifie de
22,000
façon
people
générale pour les
vaccinated.
vaccins, soit
This
les
is
douleurs
to
au
be
site de
anticipated,
l'injection,
so
la
injection
fatigue, les
site pain,
céphalées, donc les maux de tête, des douleurs
headaches,
musculaires, des
fatigue,
frissons, des
muscular
douleurs articulaires et de la
aches,
fièvre. Tous ces
joint
effets
aches,
secondaires-là sont quand
fever.
même
These secondary or
assez peu
side
fréquents
effects are
globalement.
relatively
Mais on peut s'attendre à
infrequent
avoir ces
overall,
vaccins-là,
but
c'est-à-dire ces effets
we can
secondaires-là chez
those
n'importe quel,
side
suite à
effects
n'importe quel
can be
vaccin.
expected
De
following
façon plus spécifique,
any
il y a eu
other
quelques cas,
vaccine
peut-être une soixantaine
injection.
de ce qu'on appelle
Now,
des
more
lymphadénopathies,
specifically,
donc des ganglions légèrement
as
enflés chez les gens
to
suite à l'administration
there are
du
other
vaccin.
aspects, such
Ça a été
as
observé chez les
swollen,
vaccinés,
slightly
sauf que ça
swollen
rentre dans l'ordre
lymph nodes, and that also is
Il y a eu à travers
to be
l'ensemble des gens
expected
qui les 44
from a
000
vaccine.
sujets qui ont été
From the 44,000 subjects
vaccinés
that were
dans les essais
vaccinated
cliniques, seulement
in
deux
the
cas de
clinical
réaction allergique sévère.
trials, only
Un cas
two
dans le
serious
groupe non vacciné,
allergic
c'est-à-dire qui ont reçu le placebo, puis un cas dans le groupe vacciné.
responses
Donc,
were noted,
globalement,
one
les
in the
effets, les
non-vaccinated
réactions de type
group and
allergique
the
auxquelles on
other
peut
one
s'attendre
by
lorsqu'on vient
the
avec un
in the
vaccin, qui est quand
vaccinated
même
group.
là,
So
un corps étranger qu'on
it
injecte
is a foreign body that's
dans
being
le fond, dans un
injected
but thérapeutique. Il y a
for a
toujours une
therapeutic
possibilité de
purpose, and
réaction
there's
comme pour
always a
n'importe quelle
potential
injection.
for any for a
Le
reaction,
nombre de cas
as is
qu'on
the
a
case for any
observé est très,
injection.
très
The
faible.
number of cases is very, very
Ceci
low.
dit,
That being
on
said,
continue à suivre le
we
vaccin de
continue
très
to
près
follow
et
this
il y a
vaccine
une
closely,
collaboration
and
internationale.
there
Toute
is international
l'information est
cooperation
ouverte,
on
circule.
this. All of
Il y a
that
eu deux
information
cas
is open,
qui ont été
has been
rapportés
circulated. There are two cases that have been
au
reported
Royaume-Uni.
in
Puis
the
cette
UK,
information-là
and
a
that
été
information
immédiatement
was immediately
processée par le Royaume-Uni. Ils ont émis des
shared
mises
by
en
the
garde.
UK. They
Ce qu'on sait de
issued
ces cas-là, c'est qu'ils
warnings.
sont
What we know
apparus
from
chez
these
des patients
cases
qui
is
avaient
they
des
appeared
antécédents de réaction allergique dans le
among
passé.
patients who had
Pas
had
nécessairement à des
reactions
vaccins, mais à
in
des
the
produits.
past, not necessarily to
Que ce soit
vaccines,
un médicament,
but to
un
other
aliment,
products where we're talking
par exemple.
food
Donc,
or other
actuellement, le
drugs.
Royaume-Uni a émis des recommandations
The UK has
pour
issued
voir
recommendations to see
pour
whether
recommander de pas
or to
donner le vaccin
recommend
pour
not
l'instant aux gens
giving
qui ont des
vaccines
antécédents de
to people
réaction
who do have
allergique importants de
do
n'importe
tend
quelle
to
sorte.
have strong
Au
allergic
Canada, on
reactions
est
of
à
any sort.
avoir
In
l'information
Canada,
sur ces cas-là, puis on va émettre
we're
des recommandations
receiving the
spécifiques
information
sur
to that
les
effect. We
possibilités de
will be
réactions
issuing
allergiques
advisories as to
Merci, Dr.
those
Khan.
kinds of
Follow-up.
reactions shortly.
Just quickly, so if I thought that the other jurisdiction, or maybe I guess it's just Britain, had eyed this vaccine for people over 18. Canada's authorized for over 16. If I don't know if I've got that wrong, if you could clarify, and what terms and conditions then do you feel are the biggest safeguard for Canadians that you've put on Pfizer?
Yes, so the authorization is for people over the age of 16. I think most jurisdictions are looking at the same data, so they're looking at that age range. In the clinical trials, there were some participants that were younger than that, so from the ages of 12 to 15 that were added when that was expanded in terms of the clinical trials, but those numbers were very small. So at this point in time, it's indicated for people 16 years of age and older. And the second part of your question was on the terms and conditions. So one of the provisions in the interim order is that it allows us to put terms and conditions on the license itself. And broadly, the terms and conditions sort of fall into three categories. One is the requirement for the company to submit additional and ongoing information. So it's the 6-month follow-up post the last injection for the people that were in the trials, and then ongoing data up to 2 years. There's also requirements around additional information on labeling and additional information around the quality and the manufacturing piece. But all of those terms and conditions are available on the website as well, and so people can take a look and see what those are in detail, and as those terms and conditions are fulfilled, we'll continue to update that list as well.
Thank you. Next question in the room, Globe and Mail.
Hi, Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. Dr. Sharma, you spoke to this a bit with Tonda, but can you just clarify, is Health Canada is or isn't advising against people with adverse allergic reactions take the shot right now? Or like, is that gonna, like, I understand you said it's still under review, but it's unclear if you're actually advising against it right now or where that stands.
So right now, based on the information that we've seen in the clinical trials, the product Monograph does say that if you've had an allergic reaction to the vaccine or a component of the vaccine already, then you should not take it. Now, so that's for people who had already had been exposed and had an allergic reaction to, as we said, either the active ingredient or the other ingredients in the vaccine. And just to say that that list of all those ingredients is also available on the website. So as Dr. Berthiaume had said, the people that had the allergic reactions in the UK had other history of other severe allergic reactions. They both carried adrenaline, epinephrine shots with them. At this point in time, we're not changing our recommendation, but what we're doing is that we're looking at that information, and should we need to broaden it to be extended to people with other severe allergic reactions, such as foods or other medications, then we'll make those recommendations, and we'll do it before the first person gets the vaccine.
Okay, so right now you're only advising that only people who are allergic to a specific ingredient in the vaccine should not be taking it right now.
That's right.
And my follow-up question for you is, there's been a lot of questions around whether Health Canada would be, weeks behind the FDA, let alone a day ahead. So can you just explain to us how you beat the FDA today?
Sure, we're just better. So, I mean, I think we're not in a race with any other regulator. We're not trying to beat any other regulator. What we're trying to do is beat this vaccine, and we're working against this. We're trying to beat this virus and working against this virus. So our review is, as we said, I think a lot of regulators, we're all looking around the same information. We may get things submitted to us at different times. So what the commitment was that we've made is that we are reviewing it in an expeditious way. We've expedited the review. We have not compromised in terms of the safety, efficacy, and quality. And then as soon as that review is done, we've done the authorization and we've communicated with everyone. And it just so happened we got the last piece of information late last night. People worked at it. They were up early this morning to put information, get it ready for the website. And so that's why we're announcing today. We're certainly watching what is happening in the United States. We have members of Health Canada and the Public Health Agency that will be listening in on their committee deliberations that will be happening tomorrow. And if there are any changes to our authorization, we'll do that. But just to say that the information that's been put out so far with respect to the FDA for that committee and the questions is all information that we've looked at. So there's no new data or no information that they're looking at that we haven't included in our review.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. We'll turn over to the phone, and we'll do one question on the phone, one question in the room for the remainder of the time of this portion of the press conference. Donc, nous allons nous tourner au téléphone pour une question au téléphone, une question dans la salle jusqu'à 12h45. Donc, prochaine question au téléphone. Operator, over to you.
Thank you. Our next question, la prochaine question. Ziaoli Lee, City News. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Hi, thanks. I want to ask a question about the British allergic reactions, which seems to be what everyone is interested in. I understand British regulators also included some conditions that the vaccine only be administered in environments where resuscitation may be possible if required. Going forward, in general, if another regulator puts these sorts of conditions in place, is Health Canada going to look at enacting those locally as well?
So if basically we've done the authorization. The authorization has been based obviously on the evidence and the science that we have at this point in time and that analysis. That is something that we, and all the vaccines are something that we continue to monitor, and we will continue to monitor them not only here in Canada, but we'll look at all the information that's available with respect to the vaccines. So for this vaccine and other vaccines as they get authorized. So we're looking at the information from the UK. We have to make our own analysis on that data. So the circumstances of those cases, whether they're or not they're applicable to Canada, sometimes there are issues with specific lots. We know that we get different lots that might be sent to other countries. We need to look at that as well. But we take that information and we do the analysis, and then we decide whether or not there needs to be a change or a shift in anything for Canadians. But absolutely, we've been working incredibly closely with our international regulatory counterparts all through this, the COVID pandemic, and we'll continue to do so.
Thank you. Follow up?
No follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you. And in the room now, CBC.
Oh, hi, Dr. Sharma, Tom Perry, CBC. Can you talk a little bit about, I know you're talking about side effects and allergies and that kind of thing, but I guess the process for finding out how long this virus, how long the vaccine will be effective, does it keep you from passing on the virus to somebody else? What kind of work is going to go into determining that?
Thank you for the question. So, what we're doing is we've summarized all the data from the clinical trials to date. And that's included at least 2 months of follow-up We have obviously more data because we have trials that started earlier rather than than others, and the idea is that we continue to follow that. So we know that the vaccine seems to be quite effective at a level of about 95% in the data that we've seen so far. The question will be then, when we continue to follow those patients, is that immunity is long lasting, and how long does that last? Whether or not people need to be revaccinated at any point in time. I have to say, so far from the data, it does look like that immunity is continuing, and certainly from some of the earlier animal data in the preclinical trials, it looks like it is conferring longer range immunity. But that's something that's an ongoing question. And with respect to the overall monitoring of the vaccine, it's exactly that. It's continuous. We need to keep taking a look at the data. Once we've outside of the controlled situations and it's starting to be used in larger numbers of people, things that are quite rare might come up as well. So it's all part of the process, and it's something that we do for all vaccines. We learn as we go. Certainly there's more attention placed on these vaccines with everything that we're dealing with COVID-19. But I think that everyone needs to remember that these are vaccines. When we look at our thresholds for authorization, we have to take a look at the benefits and risks. And these are vaccines that are used in otherwise healthy people. These are not chemotherapy drugs that are used in cancer. And so there's a wide range of adverse events that we would accept. These are things that are used in healthy people. So our tolerance for safety issues is very, very low.
Donc, actuellement, les données cliniques
So based on clinical data,
sur une période allant jusqu'à 2 mois après
the vaccine is effective for at least 2 months after the second dose has been injected. The theoretical models and animal models seem to suggest that the effectiveness long-term is promising with respect to this Pfizer vaccine. Additional research will be done by the manufacturer. We will continue to follow the cohort for at least 6 months of those people that were vaccinated, and then we'll have that information. Further studies will also be done. We will certainly be following up the information on safety with respect to that information for the next 2 years. The protection that is granted by the vaccine has to do with symptom protection. Can you be infected with COVID and have it be less serious? And can that illness still be, can you still be contagious? Based on the information we have, not only is it effective to protect against infection, but it would also seem to protect people from getting sick and from being contagious. All of that will have to be confirmed, however, by longer-term clinical trials. That being said, I think the main objective of the vaccine is to prevent part of the cases that we've observed that are currently overwhelming our healthcare system and our hospitals. The results are therefore very encouraging, and we feel that it's a very favorable risk-benefit analysis.
In terms of, you were talking about transparency and monitoring and that, but is there anything more that you can do to address the concerns of people who may be, even despite all this transparency, hesitant about taking this vaccine?
So first of all, I'd just like to say that I can understand where people are coming from. I think we're all dealing with a lot of uncertainties. So this is a new virus. We are having a new way of living. We've got a vaccine that's been developed very quickly thanks to incredible advances in science and technology and an unprecedented level of global cooperation. We've got a regulator that's, we've put a lot of additional resources on it, and we have looked at the review in a really efficient way. And so, there's a lot of information that's out there, and there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation that's out there. So the first thing that I would say is, we can understand that people are confused at times. It's important that they seek out information from trusted sources. That's why we're putting out a lot of information, not only on this vaccine and a commitment for other vaccines, but we put out general information about vaccination, about mRNA vaccines. We'll put out information about other types of vaccines. So make sure that people educate themselves and use those trusted sources. So that's the first part of it. And that, I think we can just keep being more open and transparent. We've always said that, and I said it in my opening remarks, that, even the best vaccine is only effective if people trust it and agree to take it. And that starts with getting information. So where do people get information? They do get information from us. We've done, there's lots of studies that show that they get information from their healthcare professionals. So we're giving information to healthcare professionals so they can have those conversations with their patients. They get that information from their peers. So we're putting out information as well on that. And when we head into a larger vaccination program, there will be a broader campaign to continue to share that information, respond to questions. It's part of the reason we're here today and on television and doing those interviews. So, I mean, it really is providing, honest, open information, really being clear about what we know, what we don't know yet. And as soon as something comes up, to communicate that clearly, I think that will go a long way. And I think there will always be people that, there might be people that are the early adopters, people that are, are really dead set against getting vaccines. There's also this group of people in the middle, we call them movable middle, that I think will respond to having that additional information. So absolutely can understand where people are coming from, but hopefully, as you can see from when we're speaking about the work that we're doing at Health Canada and the reviews and the authorizations, you can tell that we have the utmost faith and trust in that process and a commitment to being open and transparent.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We have 5 more minutes, so we'll turn over to the phone. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question, Anne-Caroline Desplanques, Journal de Montréal. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Question. Thank you for taking my question. I'd like to get back to this issue of the interim order pathway that you were referring to. Can you explain clearly and in detail what the difference is between an accelerated or expedited process and a normal process? Thank you for your question. Thank you for your question. Usually, we assess a vaccine in a normal process, a regular process. We ask the manufacturer to submit all of the information, including all the information relating to the manufacturing of the vaccine and all the data analyzed on already done clinical trials before the manufacturer can submit authorization request to Health Canada. What this emergency, or rather interim order, allows for is it allows for greater flexibility. So ongoing evaluation. In the case of Pfizer, in October, early October, when we received the submission, we were able to look at the first phases, the clinical testing on animals, the phase 1, the data. From the very start of the data on the production and manufacturing of the vaccine, we were able to look at this data from the very start, and then the results appeared on these clinical trials. We were able to complete the evaluation. So instead of having all of the information ready and then that all being submitted to Health Canada, we received this information on an ongoing basis as it was generated. On top of that, we had a dedicated team specifically earmarked to address this issue of the COVID-19 pandemic. So those measures meant that today we were able to approve the vaccine in an expedited way by maintaining, however, these same requirements in terms of safety, efficacy, and quality, which we would have done for any other vaccine. So we've adapted the process to get a quicker reaction, but there was no downside in terms of rigor. Follow-up question? Yes. In the same vein, before the pandemic began, the issue of vaccines, people being resistant to them, that was already an issue at Health Canada. What do you think you need to do at Health Canada to get people to get on board with the vaccinations? Answer. Thank you for your question. The strategy really is one of transparency and openness. We can understand that people have hesitations, people have questions about health products. Our approach is to be really transparent with all of the data, with the efficacy profile, with the side effects, so that people can take informed decisions. We recognize that people can have hesitations and be reluctant in terms of vaccines. The approach we've been taking is that the information itself is the antidote to those fears about the vaccine. By maintaining this openness, we are open in general. But as to the COVID-19 vaccine, you will be able to find things on the website. You'll see that Health Canada is accelerating the disclosure of all of this information. There's technical and less technical information available on the website, more accessible to the public there, to help Canadians understand what the benefits are, how it was created, the various stages in the regulatory process, etc.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll take one more question in the room, but we will be back at 1 p.m. for more questions for part 2 on the vaccine rollout. Prochaine question, Radio-Canada.
Oui, bonjour, Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada.
Yes.
Donc, le vaccin
Question.
est approuvé pour les
The
Canadiens de
vaccine
plus de
has
16
been
ans.
approved for
Donc, ça veut dire
Canadians
que ça
over the
exclut
age of
les
16, which
enfants.
means
Est-ce que
that
votre plan,
children
c'est
are excluded from this. Do
d'approuver
you
Pfizer aussi pour
expect
les enfants
to also
éventuellement? Et ça
approve
serait quand,
Pfizer
ça,
for children, and when do you expect that to happen? Answer, thank you for your question. As you mentioned, the vaccine has been approved for people 16 years of age and older. Already in clinical trials, there have been some participants who were between 12 and 15, but not a large enough number of that cohort to be conclusive in terms of efficacy. Usually, we start by testing among adult populations, but in some cases, there can be complementary studies after the fact to document the efficacy of these new treatments among other populations. So that's what's going to be done for Pfizer, the Pfizer vaccine. There will be complementary studies that will look at the efficacy in younger population groups. We should not forget that there are 3 other vaccines that are currently being studied, and those vaccines could also have data to prove their efficacy in other populations. So all of these things are happening at the time being, and at this point, the recommendation is 16 years and older. If we can already break that chain of transmission by having many adults vaccinated in the population, general population, that will protect children as well. Follow-up question? It's been more than 10 months since the first confirmed case of coronavirus. Now, 10 months, people have been living with bad news. Now, today, finally, we have this first vaccine that's approved. How do you feel? Answer. I think this is an incredible point in time. No one knew at first whether we would even manage to find a vaccine. I think the vaccine was developed thanks to exceptional cooperation from a regulatory standpoint and a scientific standpoint. Many efforts were made to organize these tests, these clinical tests quickly. There are all those participants who volunteered. There's also the fruit of all of those technological enhancements that have been made over the years. All of this is coming to fruition at the same time. Many factors have come together, and today we can announce this. We're fortunate in the way that the external structure of the virus is stable. There are other viruses that are less stable. So I think we can say that this is an excellent day for Canada, that we can announce a vaccine that is available and will be distributed.
Go ahead.
Sure. So the question is, the question to Dr. Berthiaume in French was, how does he feel? To be truthful, it's one of those things where, I mean, we get to stand here and sit here and talk to you about it, but there's an entire team that's just been working around the clock to go through all of these, and we've all been working around the clock. And so right now, it's you don't necessarily have the time to kind of think about celebrating, because there's just so much work to do, and there's so much more work on the way. But to echo what Dr. Berthiaume was saying, is that this is a momentous occasion. I mean, the geek in me is amazed that no one would have thought, I think, even when we looked back at the first discovery of the of the virus that less than a year later we'd be authorizing and then distributing a vaccine. So I think it's just a testament to the decades of science and technology and research that's gone into the development of that vaccine. I think it's a testament to the work of regulators internationally working together. It's a testament to our team that's really dedicated an incredible amount of time and energy and resources to do that. And I think, you know, it's an exceptional day for Canada, and it is one step. It's one step along the road. It's one tool in terms of our fight against COVID-19, along with all of the other measures. We have other vaccines that will be likely coming as well. But I think in a year where we haven't had a lot of good news, this is a bit of good news, and I think we should take a moment to acknowledge that. And then we're all going to get back to work.
Thank you, doctors. That'll be all for today's portion number 1 of the press conference. We'll be back at 1 p.m. sharp. C'est ce qui met fin à la première partie de notre conférence de presse pour aujourd'hui. Nous serons de retour à 13h. Merci. Bonjour and welcome back to the second portion of the media briefing for today for the technical briefing on the vaccine rollout. Bonjour et bienvenue à cette deuxième partie de la mise à jour des médias avec le briefing technique sur la distribution des vaccins côté logistique. Today we will hear from Dr. Howard New from the Public Health Agency of Canada, as well as Major General Danny Fortin. They will be accompanied by Dr. Supriya Sharma and Dr. Marc Berthiaume, as well as spokespeople and experts from Public Services and Procurement Canada, Indigenous Services Canada, as well as Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, to answer your questions until 2 p.m. Donc, aujourd'hui, nous allons entendre parler de Dr. Howard New de l'Agence de la santé publique du Canada, ainsi que Major Général Danny Fortin. Il sera accompagné de Dr. Supriya Sharma et de Dr. Marc Berthiaume de Santé Canada et d'experts en la matière de Services publics et Approvisionnement Canada et d'autres ministères et agences fédérales. Donc, over to you, Dr. New.
Thank you very much, Eric. Merci beaucoup. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. The purpose of today's briefing is to update you on our readiness to begin vaccinating Canadians against COVID-19. Once again, I'm joined by my colleague, Major General Danny Fortin, Vice President of Logistics and Operations for COVID-19 Immunization in Canada. And with us to answer technical questions as appropriate are Ariane Reza, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Procurement at Public Services and Procurement Canada, Dr. Supriya Sharma, the Chief Medical Advisor at Health Canada, Dr. Marc Berthiaume, Director of Bureau of Medical Sciences at Health Canada, Cheryl Kronowek, Director General of Manufacturing and Life Sciences Branch, Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, Colette Kaminski, Director General, Strategic Innovation Fund, Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, and Dr. Tom Wong, Executive Director and Chief Medical Officer of Public Health at Indigenous Services Canada. Collectively, we aim to answer your questions and provide you with an understanding of where we are at with our COVID-19 vaccine readiness. This includes distribution, timing, engagement with provinces and territories, and contingency planning. I can tell you that it's all hands on deck right now, and everyone is working full throttle. The pandemic has impacted our lives in profound and extremely challenging ways. We have all been eager for a sign of hope. As you know, the Government of Canada has announced that we now have an agreement that will see us receive up to 249,000 doses of the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine in December 2020. At this moment, we now have the first authorized COVID-19 vaccine through Health Canada's rigorous testing and regulatory process. At last, we have a reason to feel optimistic and excited about returning to the lives we led pre-COVID. The latest agreement is bringing vaccines to Canadians earlier than we hoped. Things are happening quickly. By the time the initial doses of the first vaccine doses are delivered, we will have completed the first step toward making COVID-19 vaccines available to every Canadian from whom it has been authorized and recommended. The Public Health Agency of Canada is engaging with all levels of industry, government, and health agencies to ensure 14 sites across the country are ready to receive the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccines by next week. In the next few days, we will be working very closely with the provinces and territories and many public health partners to ensure there is timely, fair, and a well-coordinated rollout. Part of this collaboration involves making sure we can receive, store, prepare, and administer the ultra-low temperature vaccine. As we work to reach these goals, we will rigorously maintain our ongoing commitment to providing Canadians with access to safe and effective vaccines. Canada has a high standard that it will not relinquish. As you know, Public Services and Procurement Canada has negotiated agreements with 7 vaccine manufacturers, so it is a matter of time before we embark on the track for more extensive immunization in this country. COVID-19 vaccine candidates will be distributed in Canada with a phased approach beginning in 2021. More details on vaccine allocation will be announced in the coming days. In the early stages of the rollout, supply will be limited. The quantity and schedule of vaccine distribution will be the subject of ongoing discussion with the provinces and territories. However, we anticipate having approved vaccines for 3 million Canadians between January and March, with supply ramping up over the rest of 2021. This has been a marathon, and we are nearing the finish line. It's essential that we not let our guard down now and continue adhering to public health measures now and as necessary, even after we have vaccines in arms. Thank you. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je vous remercie de votre présence.
Good day, everyone. I want to thank you for your attendance. This information session's purpose is to give you an update as to the state of readiness for the vaccine. I am here with my colleague, Major General Denis Fortin, Vice President of Logistics and Operations for vaccinations against COVID-19. Also here for technical question, Ariane Reza, Assistant Deputy Minister at Public Service and Procurement Canada, Dr. Supriya Sharma, Chief Medical Advisor for Health Canada, Dr. Marc Berthiaume, Director, Bureau of Medical Sciences at Health Canada, Cheryl Cronoway, Director General Manufacturing and Life Sciences Branch at Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, Colette Kaminski, Director General, Strategic Innovation Fund, Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, and Dr. Tom Wong, Executive Director and Chief Medical Officer of Public Health, Indigenous Services Canada. Our common goal is to answer your questions and allow you to understand where we are at in our preparations for vaccinating Canadians against COVID-19. This covers the issues of distribution, the timing of vaccination, the engagement with the provinces and territories, and contingency planning. I can assure you that all stakeholders are working round the clock at this point. The pandemic has deeply impacted our lives, has meant huge challenges. We have all been anticipating with great hope this important time, this important moment. We now have 249,000 doses that will be made available of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine in December 2020. We now have the first authorized vaccine authorized by Health Canada. We finally have reason to feel optimistic and enthusiastic. We can see that there will be light at the end of the tunnel and that we will be able to go back to the lives we once had. The situation is evolving quickly. Before the first doses are delivered, we will have gone past this first step, and we will be able to give Canadians who have received the authorization and recommendation to be vaccinated, will be able to vaccinate these individuals. All governments, all health organizations will make sure that the centers that have been set aside throughout the country will be able to receive the doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine by next week. We will be working closely with provinces and territories as well as with the many healthcare partners in order to guarantee a quick implementation that is fair and well coordinated. This collaboration involves ensuring that we can receive prepare and administer this vaccine that has to be maintained at an ultra-low temperature. In keeping with our efforts, we will continue to rigorously respect our permanent commitment to giving Canadians safe and effective vaccines. Canada has high, rigorous standards that it is not going to compromise on. As you know, public safety, PSPC has negotiated agreements with several manufacturers. It is just a matter of time before we can more broadly vaccinate Canadians through the country. Other vaccine candidates will be gradually distributed and rolled out through Canada throughout the year 2021. Supply will be limited during the first stages of rollout. The quantity of vaccines, the distribution, timing, all of this will be the subject of ongoing discussions with the provinces and territories. That said, the availability of vaccines will increase gradually over the coming year. In the first quarter of 2021, in other words, between January and March, Canada expects that it will receive enough authorized vaccines for 3 million Canadians. We are running a marathon, and now we can see the finish line. That being said, we need to remain vigilant and continue to respect the public health care measures even after we've been vaccinated. I'd like to now hand over the floor to Major General Fortin, who will be telling you about the logistics and operational planning related to the most recent developments and the vaccination and issues as to the vaccination against COVID-19 in general.
We've been hard at work to put in place a plan that will allow us to deliver vaccines safely and efficiently to as many Canadians as possible and as quickly as possible. We're undertaking a mobilization effort of massive proportion. Never in modern memory have we seen such an unprecedented level of collaboration and cooperation. It really makes me proud to be a Canadian and proud to serve. Our collective efforts to enhance readiness, to build capacity, and to develop innovative ways to deliver vaccines has enabled the vaccination distribution process to move ahead so that we can start to deliver vaccines to priority populations within days. We continue to forge important relationships with provinces, territories, Indigenous leaders, other government departments and partners, relationships that will allow us to come together in common purpose and to adapt to the complexity of the situation and rapidly evolving circumstances. Together, we've built and tested logistical chains suited to the individual characteristics of the vaccine. Provinces have indicated their initial locations, for a total of 14 across the country, are ready to receive the vaccines. To prepare for the imminent arrival of Pfizer vaccines, a dry run was conducted this week to confirm our ordering, the shipping, and receiving processes. Concurrently, the provinces and territories have been building their plans for distribution of vaccines within their jurisdictions and ensuring that all ancillary equipment, the training, the safety monitoring system are in place to support the rollout. As an example, devices such as this one here, the data logger that accompanies every single thermal shippers from manufacturer to the point of use, at which time it is unpacked and the data verified. And if there's a point of exclusion on the temperature reader, then steps are we follow the appropriate steps to isolate the shipment and then confirm with Health Canada whether or not they should be quarantined and disposed of. Provinces and territories alike are readying to receive the Moderna vaccine as soon as it is authorized and available. The logistics service provider contracts have been awarded. The distribution networks are in place for all of Canada's anticipated COVID-19 vaccines. On Friday this week, we'll conduct a rehearsal of concept with more than 100 participants from federal, provincial, territorial governments, Indigenous and industry partners, and key stakeholders. The rehearsal will allow each organization and entity to visualize their role in the vaccine distribution process, to confirm responsibilities, the critical handoffs, to create common understanding amongst the group, and to build confidence in the overall conduct and execution of this complex, multifaceted plan. This effort will be coordinated by the National Operations Center at the Public Health Agency, this coordination hub that keeps us all on the same page, maintaining situational awareness on the entire end-to-end process with provinces and territories, ready to respond on a moment's notice to ensure the integrity of the distribution chain. This deliberate approach to federal provincial readiness will allow us to gather lessons and to test and adjust as we move forward into the January and beyond period. As we roll into spring and summer, we anticipate a steep increase in vaccine availability. Distribution will also become easier as additional vaccines are approved, and that can be transported outside of the ultra-low temperature and frozen cold chains. We'll be ready to deliver through any eventuality as vaccines become more and more available to Canadians. The safe and efficient rollout of Canada's COVID-19 immunization campaign is our primary focus, and rest assured, security is a key consideration in the planning and the execution of the vaccine rollout. The government is seized with the task of ensuring timely and effective distribution for the full suite of anticipated vaccines. Our collective efforts over the past weeks and months, the rehearsal of our distribution and logistics systems that are currently underway, and the upcoming launch of Pfizer vaccines at designated sites all serve to set the conditions for a rapid scale-up as vaccines become more readily available in the months ahead. With that, thank you, and I welcome your questions. Nous avons travaillé d'arrache-pied pour mettre en place
We've worked tirelessly to create a plan that will allow us to administer vaccines in an effective, safe way to the largest number of Canadians possible, as quickly as possible.
Nous commençons un effort de
We
mobilisation
have
à grande
launched
échelle.
a large-scale mobilization process.
On n'a jamais vu un tel niveau
In
de
recent
collaboration
memory,
et de
we've
coopération
never
à
seen
tous
this
les
level
paliers au
of
Canada.
cooperation
Ça me rend très fier d'être Canadien,
among
et ça me rend
all
fier de
levels of
vous servir.
government, etc. It makes me very proud as a
Nos
Canadian,
efforts
it makes me very
collectifs
proud to
pour
serve
améliorer la
our
préparation,
collective efforts
accroître les
to
capacités
increase
et mettre au point
preparation,
des
increase
façons
capacity,
novatrices
and
d'administrer les
have
vaccins
innovative
ont
ways to
contribué à
administer
faire avancer le
vaccines have
processus
led
de
to
distribution
the
des
fact that
vaccins.
the distribution process
Nous serons prêts à
has been
administrer le vaccin
advanced.
contre la COVID-19
We will be prepared to
aux groupes
administer the
prioritaires d'ici
vaccine to the
quelques jours.
priority groups in the next
Nous
few
continuerons
days.
d'établir
We
des relations
continue to
importantes avec les
establish
provinces, les
strong
territoires,
relations with
les
the
dirigeants
provinces and
autochtones,
territories,
les autres ministères et
Indigenous
nos partenaires.
representatives, other
Ces
departments, and our
relations
partners.
permettent d'unir nos forces
We can combine our
pour faire cause
strengths
commune et nous adapter
to
à la
work
complexité de
together
la
and
situation
adapt
et
to the
l'évolution
complexity
rapide
of the
des
situation and the
circonstances.
quick evolution
Ensemble,
of the
nous avons
circumstances.
conçu et testé
Together,
des
we
chaînes
have
logistiques adaptées
developed and
aux
tested
caractéristiques
logistical
particulières des
chains
vaccins.
that are in
D'ici
keeping
lundi,
with the
le
various
Canada pourra
characteristics of the
compter sur 14
vaccines.
installations
By Monday,
prêtes à
in
recevoir
Canada,
et
there are
administrer les
14
vaccins.
locations in Canada that will be ready to receive and administer the
Un
vaccines
essai a
throughout
été
the country.
effectué cette semaine
A dry one was
auquel j'ai
done
référé
this
comme un
week,
dry
and I
run
referred to it
pour valider nos
earlier
processus de
to
commande,
validate our
d'expédition et de
ordering,
réception
shipping,
avant
and
l'arrivée
receiving
imminente
process
des
before
vaccins de
the
Pfizer.
imminent arrival of the Pfizer
Pendant ce temps,
vaccine.
les provinces et
At the same
territoires
time, the provinces and
ont préparé
territories
leur propre plan
will
de
have created
distribution des
their
vaccins
own distribution
pour assurer la
plan
présence
for
des
the
fournitures,
vaccine, allowing
la
for
formation des
the
travailleurs de la
equipment,
santé,
the training
et le
of
bon
healthcare
fonctionnement des
providers,
systèmes de
and
surveillance afin
proper
d'appuyer le
monitoring
déploiement. À
of
titre
the
d'exemple, comme
systems
j'ai
in order
montré
to
tout à l'heure,
facilitate
un
the deployment. As
enregistreur de données
I showed you
accompagne
when I was
chacune
speaking in
des
English,
boîtes
there's a
thermiques,
data logger that I'm holding
de
in my hand
vaccins
here that will be accompanying
et
each box of
au
vaccines
déballage au point
when it is
de distribution.
unpacked
On
at
est
the
en mesure
distribution
d'avoir
point.
une lecture
From
de la
the very beginning of the
température
process to
et
the
de
very
vérifier
end point, we can
l'intégrité de la
measure
cargaison.
the temperature at each step
Les provinces et
and
territoires se
maintain
préparent
integrity
aussi à
of each
recevoir le
shipment.
vaccin
The
de
provinces and
Moderna
territories
dès qu'il
are
sera
readying
homologué et disponible.
for the Moderna
Les marchés
vaccine
ont été
as soon as it
conclus
is
avec des fournisseurs
available.
de services logistiques.
There have been service provider
Les
contracts
réseaux de
with
distribution
logistic
sont en place
services.
pour tous les vaccins contre la COVID-19 attendus
Logistics
par le Canada.
Plans
Ce
are
vendredi,
in place.
nous procéderons à
On
une
Friday,
répétition
we
de
will be
concept
doing
avec plus de
a
100
rehearsal
participants,
of concept
les
with
gouvernements
over 100 participants,
fédéral,
the federal
provinciaux,
government,
territoriaux,
provincial governments, territorial governments, and key stakeholders will be involved.
Permettra à chaque organisation et entité de voir son rôle.
Each organization, each entity will know what its role is in the rollout of the vaccine. It will confirm the responsibilities of each, critical handoffs, ensure everyone has a common understanding, and make sure that the conduct and execution of this complex plan is in good working order. The National Coordination Centre at the Public Health Agency of Canada is the organization responsible for coordinating this effort. This coordination centre allows us to be very united in our process. We will be keeping you aware of every step of the process, along with our provinces and our colleagues from the provinces and territories and our other stakeholders. We are prepared to act at any moment in order to protect the integrity of the distribution chain from end to end. We will be able to garner lessons from this. We will be able also to make the necessary adjustments over the coming months. We expect that the vaccinations become more accessible in the spring and the summer. Distribution will be increased in terms of through these simpler supply chains that do not require ultra-low temperature frozen distribution. We will be prepared for anything as we prepare the rollout. A safe vaccination campaign is our main objective. Rest assured that security, safety is a critical aspect of the planning and execution of the vaccine. The government is responsible for ensuring that all of this is done. All of our efforts over the last few months, the current trials, our distribution systems, logistics, and now the launch of the Pfizer vaccine in these designated institutions will pave the way for quick approval of the vaccines that will become more available over the coming months. Thank you very much for your time. And on that note, I am now prepared to answer your questions. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. We will now open the telephone line to questions. We will take questions until 2 p.m. Just like in the first round, we'll take 2 questions on the phone, followed by 2 questions in the room. Donc, comme la première fois, nous allons commencer, nous allons prendre vos questions jusqu'à 14 heures.
We'll be taking your questions until 2, and then we'll start with 2 questions over the phone, 2 questions in the room.
You can ask 1 question, 1 follow-up. Une question suivie. For those who are asking questions in the room, please make your way to the freestanding mic. We'll start on the phone. Operator, over to you.
Thank you. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. There will be a brief pause while participants register for questions. Thank you for your patience. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. Il y aura un court délai permettant de vous enregistrer dans la file d'attente pour la période de questions. Merci de patienter. Our first question, la première question, Guillaume Saint-Pierre, Journal de Montréal. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour.
Question. Yes, hello. François Legault said earlier on today that he, inaudible to the interpreter, the hope was to receive a third of the doses, inaudible. Do you think this is realistic? And so thank you for the question. This is Dr. New. Perhaps I can start, and then perhaps Major General Fortin will be able to add more. What I can say to you is this. We, technically speaking here at Public Health Canada, we are working closely. And we're constantly in discussions with respect to that Senior Advisory Council with Dr. Arruda and other experts in public health, other experts from Quebec, as to how these doses will be attributed. I think I can start by saying that it is really important, given our discussions, I myself can say that I am a part of the healthcare table. Major General Fortin
avec
of
ses
course,
homologues
discusses with his
opérationnels et logistiques,
counterparts on the operations
des
and
autres
logistics
tables. Et aussi,
side
je
from the
pense
other tables.
il y aura une autre
There will
réunion des
be
premiers
another
ministres, je pense,
discussion
même
among the
demain.
premiers. I think
Donc,
that
et
is happening
on attend les
tomorrow.
autres discussions.
So
Et
there will
pour
be
nous
further
autres, au sein
discussions.
du comité consultatif
At the
spécial,
Special
on
Advisory Committee,
discuté l'enjeu de l'attribution.
discuss this
En
issue
fin
of
de compte,
attribution.
la recommandation des
Ultimately,
autorités de
the
santé publique, c'est
recommendations
on va
of the
faire
public health
l'attribution
authorities
selon
is
la
that the
population.
attribution
Ça
will
veut
be
dire,
done
attendez, par
based
habitant, dans
on
chaque province et
population,
territoire.
so
C'est sûr, on a eu
on the
des
number per
discussions, on
capita,
peut toujours
basically,
discuter les
throughout
données.
the
Ah oui,
provinces.
peut-être
Of
une
course, there are
province a
discussions
plus de
ongoing.
personnes
Perhaps
âgées, plus de
one
travailleurs
province has
santé, mais en fin de
more
compte,
seniors, one province, may have fewer.
c'est correct
But
que
at the
tout
end
le
of the
monde est
day,
d'accord
it's
qu'on
fine
commence
that
avec
everyone
la
agrees, I think, that
population
we
par
should
habitant.
begin
Deuxièmement,
per
une autre
capita.
considération, c'est
Now,
c'est
another
quoi
consideration is
les groupes prioritaires.
who the
Donc,
priority
c'est
groups
une autre
are.
question. On
That's
est
another issue.
en train de discuter
We are
avec les
currently
populations
discussing this
prioritaires, mais je pense que
as
de
to
passer
the
la
priority
parole, ce
populations.
que je veux dire, c'est on
What
a
I can
discuté,
say
on
is
commence
that
avec
we
la
have
population
discussed the
par
question,
habitant,
and we are
selon
looking
l'objectif
at
de
a
la santé
distribution
publique.
per population from the public health perspective. Hello, this is Général Fortin. I can add that from now until end of March, we expect that we will be distributing up to 6 million doses of approved vaccines. That will be done in the context of a national rollout. I think the provinces can expect that they will be receiving a portion of that will be attributed to each one province and territory.
L'horaire de la distribution à l'échelle nationale
Rollout nationally
chacun des
for
produits,
each product
ça demeure à être confirmé.
is yet to
Et
be
on est dans des
confirmed.
discussions
We
à
are
tous les
having
jours,
discussions on a daily
plusieurs fois
basis,
par jour,
multiple
je dirais
times a
même,
day, I would
avec
even
Pfizer
say,
présentement,
with
pour
Pfizer
élaborer le
today
plan de
to set up
distribution
a distribution
pour les
plan
prochaines
for the coming
Alors,
weeks.
il y a encore des choses à
Again,
ajuster.
there are things that
Puis je pense
will need to
qu'on
be
a
adjusted.
une visibilité sur le montant
We have some
global,
visibility on the
la
overall
répartition et à quel moment
amount,
ces,
the
ces
distribution,
doses vont
and
arriver
at what
et à quel
time,
endroit.
at what the
Ça
timing
demeure
of
quelque chose
the
sur
arrival of
lequel on
these
travaille.
doses will be, and all of that is something that we are considering.
Merci, c'était
Follow
clair.
up? Thank you, that was clear.
Juste par rapport donc à la semaine prochaine, Québec prévoit vacciner
Next
dans
week,
deux CHSLD.
Quebec
Pfizer nous confirme
intends
que
to
les
vaccinate
premières
people
doses
in
ont été
long-term care
distribuées
homes.
au point de livraison.
Pfizer is inaudible to the interpreter.
Donc, vous avez identifié 14 lieux là, de livraison.
You've identified 14 sites.
Donc, Saint-Antoine à Québec et Mémonite à Montréal font partie de ces 14 lieux.
Inaudible to the interpreter. Something about the sites and whether that will be available.
Effectivement, les deux sites
Answer.
ont été annoncés par
The
la
two
province de
sites have
Québec,
been
font
announced
partie
by the
des
province
14
of
sites à
Quebec.
l'échelle
Those two
nationale.
sites announced by Quebec are part of the 14 sites nationally that have been announced.
Merci beaucoup. Prochaine question,
Thank you.
operator.
Next question, operator.
Thank you. Our next question, Dylan Robertson, Winnipeg Free Press. Votre ligne est ouverte. Please go ahead.
Hi there. The Manitoba Premier says Ottawa increased the province's vaccine quota by boosting 15% of the Moderna quota to account for Indigenous communities. I wanted to know if that's accurate, what other changes you have done for provinces with their quotas, and if there's any specific parameters for protecting Indigenous people other than the vague outlines in the vaccine plan.
Thank you for the question. It's Dr. Maybe I'll start and maybe I'll back up a bit. As I was saying in French, that certainly one point I want to make is that there's a very tight, I would say, collaboration that's obviously necessary between, quote, the public health and the logistics side of the house. So that's why Major General Danny Fortin and myself and our respective teams are working very closely together. I can only comment on the tables that I sit at. You know, there's lots of, I would call, federal, provincial, territorial tables or FPT tables. I can talk about the public health table, the special advisory committee on which Dr. Tam and myself and our counterparts, the chief medical officers of health, we have very active discussions. So I'll speak to that. And as everyone knows, there's also a First Minister's meeting that will be taking place tomorrow. So there will obviously be other discussions as well. At the SAC table, what we've discussed in terms of the principles moving forward is that we've agreed from a public health perspective that we will go with our per capita sort of a formula for distribution allocation of vaccines to each of the provinces and territories. It's for certain we've had active discussion. People could quibble and say, well, look at this. I think if I look at the census data, I've got more seniors, older people in my province, or maybe I've got a greater number of healthcare workers. But at the end of the day, I think it all evens out, and I think we're all agreed that we're going with a per capita sort of allocation. Then the next point I think that you're referring to is that we take very seriously the recommendations have come from our National Advisory Committee on Immunization, NACI, and you can see that recently they've come out with sort of 4 priority groups. So if we're looking at sort of the fact that there is a limited number of doses of vaccine available in the first quarter of 2021, the groups that should be looked at in terms of priority, obviously because they're at greater risk of either becoming infected, having more severe consequences, but also maybe transmitting to others who are more vulnerable. Those would be older Canadians, starting with those greater than 80 years of age, and then maybe as circumstances permit, maybe going to a younger group, greater than 70 years of age. Residents and staff in long-term care facilities, healthcare workers, especially those who provide direct patient care, and Indigenous communities. So that's the principles, and now we get to the reality. And this is where the interface between public health and logistics becomes very important. So the 2 vaccines that we've been planning for, and the planning obviously at the SAC table, was taking place even in advance of having any approved vaccines. So where we're looking at the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. So now we have today, congratulations to our colleague at Health Canada, we now have 1 approved vaccine. But our planning still continues with respect to having potentially both Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine in hand. So one thing I think that we've already shared is that looking at the sort of the logistics, the fact that the Pfizer vaccine obviously is much more challenging in terms of the cold chain requirements, ultra cold chain. The discussions we've had at the SAC table have led to a consensus decision that it doesn't make practical sense to use the Pfizer vaccine in the territories up north. And therefore, their request was that, yes, maybe they'll sit out, they won't sort of expect to receive the Pfizer vaccine, but they would like the Moderna vaccine. So here we go in terms of, I think, good FPD collaboration. If we're expecting around 6 million doses total of the 2 vaccines in the first quarter of 2021, there was agreement that the territories, in terms of their allocation, will receive exclusively the Moderna vaccine, or maybe other vaccines that are approved, but are obviously not as stringent in terms of logistical requirements like the Pfizer vaccine. And I think to the credit, the provinces have then agreed to, yes, if we're agreeing to send all of the Moderna vaccine to the territories because of the unique circumstances in the north, then we will sort of reallocate and take a greater share of, quote, the Pfizer vaccine available so that the Moderna vaccine can be obviously given to the territory. So you can see those are the kind of active discussions we're having. So then we move on to sort of the next part in terms of the Pfizer vaccine and the very stringent requirements and the point of what we call utilization, the 14 sites and so on. I think at a very practical level, and I can't speak for the provinces and territories, there's some very, I think, intense discussion and planning going on. Because even if you look at sort of the allocation, the Pfizer vaccine will not come all at once. It will come in sort of regular shipments. So as you receive your first 1,000 doses, who do you give it to? You look at the 4 groups. In a given province, you might even make a decision between priority populations. For example, certainly the government of Quebec, for reasons I can fully understand, say they would like to have their first doses delivered in long-term care facilities. I think we can get that. In another province, maybe they would say that, with our planning and factors being considered, we would like to vaccinate our healthcare workers first, obviously give direct patient care. So those are decisions undertaken at a provincial and territorial level. Then you take it down to a very practical level. Okay, if you're going to vaccinate healthcare workers, well, where do you start? All healthcare workers who deliver healthcare, you might have it be easier, more feasible to do it maybe starting off at a facility in an urban setting. Not to say that healthcare workers who provide healthcare, direct healthcare in a more remote or rural setting are not as important, but in terms of the feasibility, the sequencing, those are all factors that need to be considered. So I think I'll leave it at that. And so getting back to your question in terms of Indigenous peoples and so on, those are part of some of the practical considerations, because the final point I'll make is that it's been a point of discussion at the SAC. What is the difference really in practical terms between a community in the territories up north that is quite south and close to the border with a province that also might have a community that's in the northern part of their jurisdiction. It's sort of a political jurisdictional border, but at the end of the day, those two communities, in terms of the geographical reality of what they're dealing with, is the same. So I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. New, for that very detailed response. Follow-up, Dylan?
Okay, so I'm still left wondering here about the quota shifting for provinces for Indigenous communities. Dr. New is saying that it's per capita, but the Manitoba Premier said 15% extra to account for Indigenous communities in the first quarter. So I don't really have clarity there. I'm wondering if Major General Feltin or someone could speak to that. And my follow-up is, Ottawa has a fiduciary duty to First Nations, but you're actually asking provinces to prioritize Indigenous people without any hard parameters. Is that correct? And, is Ottawa worried that they're going to be found to not be holding up their constitutional duty to look after First Nations?
It's actually, maybe I'll answer the first part in terms of, you say, fiduciary responsibility. Certainly, I think Indigenous peoples, I think from a scientific perspective, we recognize are at increased risk. So I think from the public health perspective, we're all on the same page in terms of recognizing their priority group for vaccination. I think we've had very good discussions, and certainly my understanding is that when it comes to really delivery of vaccination within the individual provinces and territories, there's been great work, collaboration that's obviously evolved over the years, so that within the existing systems for delivery of vaccination to various populations, including Indigenous within the provinces and territories, that's, I think, established very well to various degrees in the provinces and territories, and certainly I think the anticipation is that that would continue even as we give the vaccines to the provinces and territories in terms of how they've always rolled out vaccinations for their populations, including Indigenous populations. Certainly, I think that there may be other considerations in terms of specific communities, but I think as a general principle, I think it's a shared, responsibility in terms of a good collaboration between the federal government and provinces and territories.
General Fortin, I would only add that we're very much aware of how complicated it is to distribute vaccines with very stringent requirements across the Canadian landscape, with the population distribution that we have in winter. So there's a level of complexity there that's a masterclass in itself. The other piece is some vaccines will become easier over time, easier to handle and to distribute over time as we get more stability data. But also important is to highlight, as I've indicated earlier, highlight the fact that stakeholders come together and have discussions. Indigenous leaders are part of those discussions. ISC, in close coordination with us, we're focusing on how we can prepare ourselves for that complicated distribution on reserves, in close coordination with provinces and territories. In provinces, the territories, they are very resilient. And they've started to identify some possible friction points in terms of delivery that we're all together looking at. But in terms of the distribution at scale, that's the result of, as I mentioned before, a whole nation effort. All those different perspectives are being factored in. We, of course, don't have all the answers today on this, but we're very much aware of that, and we continue to pay attention to that every day. Oui. Alors, oui, faut que je recommence.
Yes, so I have to do this
alors, la
all over again. So the rollout of the vaccines that have these specific requirements, such as ultra low temperature, when you think of the country, the size and the distribution of the population throughout the country in the wintertime, it involves a number of challenges, as I've said. This is a masterclass in and of itself, as I said, in English. Good luck saying that in French. Clearly, with our partners, we are having discussions with the various orders of government, Indigenous services, that is working closely with us on this. So we don't have all the answers today on distribution in those areas that require particular attention, but we're working at addressing these issues with the provinces and the various orders of government, the various federal departments.
I'd also like to give an opportunity to Dr. Tom Wong, who is obviously the Chief Medical Officer of Public Health and Indigenous Services Canada, for any additional comments he would like to make.
Question. It is important that First Nations, Métis, Inuit are being invited to sit at the table with provinces and territories in order to co-develop a deployment plan together. It's only, with walking together down the same path, then that we can achieve the greatest accomplishments. So with that, the federal government has been identifying the mechanism for doing that, including convening a federal, provincial, territorial, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit vaccine planning working group, inviting all the provinces and territories together with our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit partners, including urban Indigenous partners and Indigenous Physicians Association, Indigenous Nurses Association, to come to the same table to actually discuss about the rollout plan. And this is at the national level, but we would want to facilitate and promote and advocate for that to be replicated, in each province and territory. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. We will now move to the room for 2 questions. We'll start with CTV.
Hi, Dr. New and Major General Fortin, Mackenzie Gray with CTV News. Quebec has said that they are expecting their first shipment of vaccines to arrive, I think, on Monday. Saskatchewan thinks they're getting it on Tuesday. Is that accurate with the timeline that you expect is going to happen? And can you take us through the process when they leave Belgium? Where are they going to land in Canada? Can you just take us through that?
So we expect vaccines to be shipped very soon, by the end of the week. I think this is Wednesday afternoon. The Pfizer indicated that they would be prepared to ship by Friday. So assuming Friday, we could see vaccines arrive Monday, probably Tuesday. Well, we'll know more as we move forward in the next 36 hours. We just don't have that fidelity just yet. But now that Pfizer knows that the vaccine is approved, they can actually push a button on moving forward on that plan. So we'll follow that very closely, and we'll be able to and provinces will be able to see when those vaccines arrive at destination. As we executed the dry run this week, we identified that from the moment that the thermal shippers were shipped from Belgium, 36 hours later, the first one started to arrive, they have all arrived but one box that arrives tomorrow, I believe in the morning. So this is very much as when you order stuff online that comes from overseas. You have an ability to track, and things arrive. And of course, this is closely followed. And this was part of the dry run. Really identify those elements, those points of transfer, and if the whole thing works according to plan. And so far, everything proved to work very well. Oui, alors les vaccins, on s'attend à ce que la compagnie soit en mesure d'envoyer dès vendredi les vaccins au Canada.
Pfizer be able to send the vaccines from Belgium to Canada. They will be leaving on Friday. We can expect that they will arrive here Monday or the early next week. To get back to the exercise that we engaged in this week, we could see that from the time the boxes were put on a plane, it took 36 hours for the boxes to arrive. I think the second box should arrive tomorrow morning, so it should only take a few days. Thank you.
I know the provinces have a stake in this question, but just kind of hypothetically or generally, Major Fortin, is the expectation that vaccinations will take place at the airport, let's say, or will they be able to the vaccines be able to transport at hospitals? I know in the UK they're doing them at hospitals right now. And you've mentioned the 14 sites. Can you tell us where those 14 sites are?
So Pfizer will bring, with their third-party logistic provider, they will bring the vaccines to the points of use, to the 14 initial points of use. That is where the vaccines would be administered. Moving forward, as we learn more about the vaccine and the ability to transport it frozen, unfrozen, and so on, we'll be able to explore other options, and more points of use will be added to this. Provinces have identified those locations. Provinces and territories have identified locations for Moderna, and that's all being compiled and looked at right now. So as we have more visibility on the flow, we'll turn on additional points of use in the provinces. Really, the provinces are driving that process in close coordination with us. No, it's at medical facilities.
Thank you. Next question, Globe and Mail.
Hi, Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. To Mackenzie's question on Saskatchewan saying December 15th, can you confirm whether Canadians will get their shots as of December 15th? That's when the first shots will happen?
Well, we expect vaccines to arrive maybe as early as Monday. And it takes time to prepare the vaccine. As I explained in other engagements, I indicated you need to thaw, you need to mix, decant. And they have all that they require to execute this process, and they have the knowledge as well to do it by now. So it's totally possible that as early as midweek next week, maybe even the 15th, depending on when we receive them. But I'd be speculating at this point because we haven't seen boxes with vaccines depart the facility. So as we get more, we'll be able to get more clarity on this.
Follow-up. Oh, français.
Alors c'est entièrement possible que dès
So it is entirely possible that midweek next week, that in some areas we'll be able to administer the vaccine, given the fact that we expect to receive, or we can expect to receive the vaccines as of Monday.
The
Thank you.
longer-term plan shows that the general population will get vaccinated between April and December, with most people getting vaccinated between April and June. How are you going to make sure this isn't like the Hunger Games of vaccines? How are you going to actually make sure that there's some sort of organized rollout? How will people get in line and ensure that it happens?
Okay, Dr. Yu, maybe I'll start with that. Thank you very much for the question. As we've indicated, certainly the first vaccine out of the pipeline is the Pfizer vaccine, and certainly we anticipate receiving, I think, 4 million doses or so in sort of the first quarter of 2021. And of course, we anticipate having regulatory approval, hopefully, for the Moderna vaccine. And also, if that's the case, I think at this point, my understanding is with the planning is for 2 million doses as well. So that's 6 million doses in total for 2021. Then for the first quarter, for the first quarter, sorry. That's right. So with that, what NACI has given us is that even before preliminary guidance in terms of the priority groups in general, healthcare workers, essential workers, and so on, what they've given us more recently is more focused advice in terms of the sequencing for priority populations, even at a more granular level, focusing on what we might expect in sort of the first quarter. However, what we're anticipating is that we have agreements with 7 vaccine manufacturers in total, and if all goes well with any additional ones, obviously there's 2 others are also have submitted applications to Health Canada, we'll have a suite of vaccines, of approved vaccines. And of course, with our advanced purchase agreements, we anticipate getting many millions more of doses. And so I think Major General Fortin can speak to it as the sort of the experience accumulates, the comfort level in terms of the vaccination sites and administering the vaccine to Canadians. We anticipate that the provinces also will be able to organize more sites of vaccination, maybe with a different sort of a combination of vaccines. And certainly some of the other vaccines that we anticipate getting approval will be much easier to, I would say, handle, manipulate, and administer compared to the Pfizer vaccine. And so I don't anticipate there should be any issue problem in terms of offering a wider and growing number of Canadians vaccines starting from April on. Anything to add?
Perhaps I would just add provinces and territories have been administering vaccines They're in charge of the immunization plan. Those vaccines are very different. So there's a level of cooperation, of course, that that is required to ensure that we do this as effectively, as rapidly, and as safely as possible on a national scale, at a scale and quantities that we have never seen before. But we must not forget that people actually do know how to do this. So it will be with medical professionals in facilities that are appropriate for handling vaccines and providing vaccines, administering vaccines. So we very much turn to provinces, territories, and those actually do this for a living to scale up at a pace that is reasonable, that is appropriate for the quantities we expect to receive.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn back to the phone for one question and then to the room for one question. Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question, Paul Vieira, Wall Street Journal. Your line is open. Please go ahead.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I know some of this ground I'm going to ask about was covered yesterday, but I think it merits further clarification or such. Regarding the issue of, the elderly, especially those in long-term care homes, what contingency plans are in place to ensure those in long-term care homes are eligible or can receive the Pfizer vaccine among this first limited batch, or are they going to have to wait for the Moderna given the complications? Can you speak to that, please?
Dr. Maybe I'll start and then pass it over to Major General Fortin. So, yes, we certainly appreciate the sort of unique requirements for the Pfizer vaccine. We also recognize that the long-term care, both the residents and personnel working in those facilities are one of the priority populations for vaccination. So taking that into account, and certainly the final decision in terms of how that rolls out rests with the provinces and territories. We've already mentioned for the province of Quebec, they've indicated a strong desire to start with the resident staff in their long-term care facilities. And as Major General Fortin has indicated, discussions are ongoing to make the initial points of use, the Delta be a bridge so that there are actually those types of settings in which the vaccinations can be given. Major General?
Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add to this. I think it's mostly public health, the public health aspect of that readiness.
Thank you. Follow up?
No, that's it.
Thank you. We'll go back to the room. Next question, Toronto Star.
Hi, Tonda McCharles, Toronto Star. Dr. New, do you or don't you have a vaccination campaign coverage goal, whether or not you have an idea of what the exact percentage is for herd immunity? What is the goal of coverage of Canadians you want vaccinated for this campaign?
Thank you very much for the question. I would say that the overall goal is really to vaccinate as many Canadians as possible, as quickly as possible. Certainly, we recognize, around the world, but here in Canada as well, the morbidity and mortality across all age groups. No one has immunity. It's a novel virus and certainly a pandemic without precedent. So I think that's our overall goal, vaccinate as many Canadians as possible, as quickly as possible. But with that, we recognize that we have work ahead of us in terms of, I would say, reinforcing Canadians' confidence in vaccines. I think the first good step, of course, is Canadians understanding that we have one of the best regulatory systems in the world. They've gone through their due diligence, and I think that Canadians can rest assured that the first vaccine that's been approved, the Pfizer vaccine, is safe and effective. After that, I think certainly we'll be looking at the different modalities, ways to pass information, provide tools to our frontline healthcare providers to be able to provide Canadians with the information necessary so that they can have what we call informed consent to be able to with confidence, accept the vaccines are going to be offered.
So that's not a goal. That's a wish. That's hope. That's a hope is not a strategy, I'm always told. But anyway, and the other thing I want to know is, General Fortin, can you talk about the, can you talk about the Pfizer shipments and why does it take 36 hours to get from Belgium to Canada? Do they transship on Iceland or, Greenland? Where are they going? How come it's taking 36 hours? Do they use their own planes? Are they on a FedEx plane or are they on an Air Canada? Like, what's the actual detailed trip? Thanks.
So I can tell you what we observed with the dry run, and it's up to Pfizer to really, with their third-party logistics, they deal with UPS on that particular front. My understanding is that it's mostly with UPS and maybe others as well, but UPS is the primary. So it's entirely possible that it changes somewhat as we go forward, but UPS took possession of the package, put that on a plane, brought this to Cologne, Germany, from Belgium to Cologne, to Kentucky, to points of arrival in Canada by air, and then further distribution by road to different locations. There may have been a mix of air and road here, but it's a UPS-led activity on behalf of Pfizer.
Thank you. We'll now turn to the phone. Operator, next question. Just being conscious of time, though, we're getting very close to 2 p.m., so please keep your questions and your responses as short as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, David Atkin, Global News. Votre ligne est ouverte. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much. Dr. Sharma, sorry to come back to vaccines, but here's the question. I'm a geek too, and I'm excited, but I think the question is about the 2 allergic reactions in the UK, or about the 2 NHS workers who had a reaction. They were in the wild. It was not part of the pilot. There's 2 ingredients in the vaccine, a non-medicinal ingredient and a medicinal ingredient. The medicinal ingredient is a little string of nucleotides, an RNA. Is it likely that people are allergic to RNA, or is it more likely people are allergic to the non-medicinal agreements, the phosphate dihydrate, the potassium phosphate, the potassium chloride? Can you give us a sense of where, in Health Canada's knowledge, something's more likely to be allergic, the non-medicinal part, or is it a little string of RNA that I could be allergic to?
Thanks for the question. So in terms of the vaccine, you're right. So the components are the mRNA, that's the active ingredient, and then there's a series of non-medicinal ingredients. I mean, technically, scientifically, you can be allergic to anything. So proteins, an mRNA molecule is a protein, you can be allergic to them. Actually, most of the allergies are to protein, so it is possible. But you're right, more often than not with vaccines, it may be an allergy to the non-medicinal ingredients. So part of what we look at when we are assessing the cases is trying to do what we call root cause analysis. First of all, is an allergic reaction due to the vaccine, or could it be due to something else? With respect to the 2 individuals in the UK, they had a history of severe allergic reactions. And then if it is due to the vaccine, then we see if we can find out a component, because then as an alternative, somebody that has an identified allergy could have an alternative vaccine. So I think we're in the process of looking at that, but technically you can be allergic to almost any molecular substance.
Thank you. Follow up.
Thanks very much. So just want to come back to something Major Fortin said and Dr. New said, and this goes to trying to give vaccines to people in long-term care facilities. Dr. New, as you noted, Quebec has said that's their number 1 priority, and your quote was, "I think we get that." In other words, Quebec is going to be able to vaccinate people who cannot move outside of their LTC facility. But Major Fortin, you said that is where the vaccine will be used, and you were speaking about the 14 points of care. So I'm looking to get a sense of, for residents of long-term care facilities who cannot be moved or it's difficult to move them, is there a plan in place for those provinces that want to inoculate LTC residents first or even in the second group? Is it possible to put it in the home rather than have a long-term care facility residents come to the point-of-use facility?
Yeah, as Major General Fortin, I can tell you that there's a couple of hundred points of use that are anticipated with the Pfizer vaccine. So we're starting in the province of Quebec, to use this example, two locations, and then we'll grow from there. The province will grow from there. Those are the locations that they announced today or last night. They're hospital centers, long-term care facilities, but that's a significant size. How they execute the vaccination, whether they bring healthcare workers and those that have no mobility issues to that location for vaccination, that's up to Quebec to actually execute.
Thank you very much. We'll move back to the room. Prochaine question, Radio-Canada.
Oui, bonjour, Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada.
No, this is Laurence
Je sais
Martin,
qu'on a reçu
Radio-Canada.
un rapport, mais je me demandais si
I
c'était
know
possible
that
pour vous
a
d'expliquer,
a
Dr.
report
New,
was
peut-être,
issued, and
Major Général
perhaps
Fortin,
Dr. New or Major
combien
Général
de Canadiens
Fortin could
exactement vont
explain
être
how many
vaccinés
Canadians
au
will
deuxième
be
trimestre,
vaccinated
au
in the
troisième
second
trimestre,
quarter, the
et
third quarter,
comment ça se fait que tout à coup, on
and
est
why
capable
is it that all
d'avoir
of a
ces réponses-là,
sudden
parce que
we
dans les
can
dernières
get
semaines,
these
vous nous
answers?
disiez,
Because up until
il y a
now,
plein
for
de
the last
choses
few weeks, you
qu'on ne
said
contrôle
there are
pas,
so many
la
things we
situation est
cannot
fluide, puis là, tout à
control, the
coup, on arrive à
situation
avoir
is
des
fluid,
chiffres.
and now we've got figures.
OK, merci pour la question.
Answer, thank you for the question. I can start by saying
oui, on attend comme peut-être 6 millions de doses
that we
de
expect
vaccins
6
pour
million
le
doses
premier
of
trimestre.
vaccines for the first
Ça veut dire
quarter,
que c'est 3 millions
which
de
means
Canadiens.
3 million
Mais aussi,
Canadians. But
si le vaccin Moderna va être
the Moderna
approuvé,
vaccine
homologué. À part
will
de
also
ça,
be approved at
c'est
some
fluide
point.
parce
Apart from
qu'on
that,
attend
things
encore
remain
peut-être les autres
fluid because
vaccins
we're still
qui
looking
ne
at the
sont
other
pas
vaccines
encore
that have not
homologués.
yet been approved.
Et si on est optimiste et on
And
attend
if we are
des autres vaccins,
optimistic
à part
as to those
Pfizer
other
et Moderna,
vaccines,
oui,
aside
c'est
from
sûr, on peut
Pfizer and
offrir la
Moderna,
vaccination,
of course,
l'administration de vaccination
we can vaccinate people,
plusieurs millions de Canadiens.
several
Donc, je ne
million
peux pas dire plus que
Canadians.
ça
I
parce que
cannot say
c'est
more than that because the situation remains fluid and continues to evolve.
Ariana Reza,
Perhaps Ariana Reza has a few words to add as to the contracts, Assistant Deputy Minister, and perhaps Major General Fortin.
Oui, merci. Seulement pour ajouter, comme vous le savez, à ce jour, nous avons signé des
Unfortunately, the
accords
sound
avec
is not sufficient to allow for proper
Nous
interpretation.
aurons accès à une quantité initiale de 214 millions de doses et des doses optionnelles pour un total de 414 millions. Alors, ce qu'on a partagé aujourd'hui,
The information is inaudible to the interpreter in the booth.
basé sur l'approbation réglementaire et les calendriers de livraison prévus des vaccins. Alors, c'est un estimat. Merci.
Comment inaudible?
OK, excusez-moi.
Sorry.
Ça fait plusieurs fois qu'on vous voit en conférence de
Question.
presse
We've seen
depuis,
you
en fait, depuis le début
at
de
these
l'année
press
2020.
conferences since the beginning of
Vous
2020.
nous avez annoncé
You
beaucoup de mauvaises
have
nouvelles.
announced many
Comment vous vous sentez aujourd'hui? Il y a un premier vaccin.
terrible things to us. And how do you feel today, given this announcement of this new vaccine? How do you feel?
Je suis
Answer.
ravi.
I'm delighted,
Optimiste.
optimistic. I think really this is a light at the end of the tunnel, but we also have to stay patient. Even though there will be other vaccines that will be approved soon, but we cannot lose track of the importance of maintaining these public health measures in place for now. Before we have a large proportion of Canadians vaccinated, we need to maintain these public health measures. To tell you honestly, it's going to be a tough winter. I think people throughout the country have to think that it's important to maintain all public health measures in place over the winter time. And in the first quarter, we will start vaccinating more Canadians. But it is a time for celebration now. Thank you.
We'll take one
Thank you,
last
Doctor.
question on the phone.
Thank you. Merci. Our last question, la dernière question, Adam Miller, CBC News. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Hi, thanks very much for taking my question. You know, we've talked a lot about logistics and rollout, but one thing you said, Dr. New, was a key part was reinforcing Canadians' confidence in vaccines going forward. You know, is public health messaging a key part of that? And is it a concern of yours that, you know, there are going to be people, you know, at some point in the rollout who may not want to get a vaccine, and how are we going to instill confidence in these vaccines going forward?
That's a good question. Thank you very much. I would say that in terms of vaccine confidence, it's something obviously we've recognized and dealt with as an issue even before COVID-19. Certainly, the lessons learned in terms of how we give credible information, what are the issues that Canadians are concerned about, and how we can best address them with giving them credible information from trusted information sources. Those are all of the things that we're looking at. Obviously, it was pre-COVID-19, but obviously it's also very important right now. Not to get into all of the details, but we have lots of folks working on this issue. Certainly will be rolling out, I imagine, in various ways, various campaigns to give Canadians across the country all of the information that they're looking for so that they can make an informed choice. So I think maybe that might be for another press conference in terms of more of the details in terms of that specific issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Follow-up?
Just wondering how big of an issue you think vaccine hesitancy will be, in this rollout plan, and at what point? I mean, we're talking about April to July, to maybe December for the average Canadian, but is this an issue that you foresee in the near future, or is it something, you don't think is going to be as big of an issue in the next few months?
I think it's an important issue all the time, and certainly as we start to roll out the vaccines in the coming weeks, it will be important to build on that. With a successful rollout with individuals who received the vaccine, I think testimonials, people saying, "Hey, I got the vaccine. It was good. I'm glad to do it. It protects me. It protects my loved ones." I think it's important for everyone to make an informed choice. I think the momentum will grow with time as we offer the vaccines to more and more Canadians. So I think, yes, that'll be part of it. And of course, as I said before, the outstanding questions, I think people do have questions about the fact that, the vaccines that were developed so quickly, how does this relate to maybe other vaccines and so on? We recognize those are all very live issues. I think it's a testament to modern science and great global collaboration that a vaccine was developed so quickly. But we need to reassure Canadians that it is safe and effective, and that they should hopefully take up the offer to get vaccinated. And as I said many times, the first step obviously was showing Canadians that with the due diligence, our regulatory colleagues approved the first vaccine, and we expect them to do the same thing with any other vaccine candidates that put a submission forward to them.
Thank you, Doctor. Very last question for today, CBC.
Major General, can I just ask you how delicate this vaccine is when you crack open the cases and you look at the monitors? If it's gone above a certain temperature for even just a short period of time, does that batch have to be thrown out? And I mean, do you have an estimate for how much you might lose in transit?
So I don't have a clear answer on the estimate, but what I do know is that the reader, such as this one here, will give you an indication that there was something incorrect with the temperature, the fluctuation temperature, and then we'll turn to the experts, and they will advise. Health Canada will advise on what to do next. But that batch will be isolated, and then the proper actions will be taken.
Follow-up microphone, please.
I don't know.
Dr. Sharma?
Yeah, so these are mRNA vaccines, so they are delicate in the sense that it's a stability issue. So part of the development of mRNA vaccines were really to mix them with something to make them more stable so they don't break down. And that's where it's called lyophilization. There's fat lipids that are put around it to kind of buffer that. The issue is that in its frozen form, it needs to be kept between -60 and -80 degrees Celsius. And so if it goes either too hot or too cold, then there might be a chance that mRNA might break down. And then you don't have as much surety both on the efficacy side in terms of how the vaccine will work and on the safety side. It's unlikely that it would make that much of a difference, but it really is, these are the conditions under which it's been studied. So if you really go outside of those conditions, then in general, the recommendation is to not use that vaccine.
Estimate for how much you might lose?
Well, it's really around the handling, right? So the hope is that you don't have any. But in terms of when you're doing the planning for rollout, in general, if you look at how the vaccine is then taken out, thawed, used, and you might have some loss along the way, in general, you plan for about 5% spoilage overall. But that's overall. That's not just on the cold chain. That's in all of the handling of the vaccine.
Thank you very much. That will be all for today's press conference. C'est ce qui met fin à la conférence de presse pour aujourd'hui. Bonne journée.